You believe you have control. That belief is the problem. Most men don't lose control because they are weak. They lose control because they were never tested. As long as life is predictable, control feels real. You stay calm when nothing is at stake. You feel disciplined when pressure is optional. Then pressure arrives without warning, and everything collapses. This is the moment most men misunderstand. You don't lose control when things go wrong. You lose control when things go wrong faster than you can react. Anger isn't the issue. Fear isn't the issue. Stress isn't the issue. Speed is. The faster you react, the less control you actually have. This is why calm men snap out of nowhere, why disciplined men suddenly make decisions they regret, why intelligent men say, "I don't know what came over me." Nothing came over them. Their illusion was exposed. This is stillness and direction. If you are here to feel inspired, this will feel uncomfortable. But if you want to understand why control disappears exactly when you need it most, stay. And if this way of thinking speaks to you, like the video and subscribe, not for motivation, but so you stay connected when pressure tests you again. Most people think control is a personality trait. It isn't. Control is a system. And most men don't have one. They rely on mood, on confidence, on keeping it together. That works only when time is on your side. The samurai knew this was dangerous. They understood that pressure doesn't need to overwhelm you. It only needs you to move too quickly. A rushed word, a rushed decision, a rushed reaction. Control is lost before you even realize it's happening. This is why telling yourself to stay calm never works. Calm is too slow. By the time you remember to breathe, you've already reacted. The samurai saw this pattern repeat endlessly in men who believed they were strong. So they built a method that did not depend on calmness, confidence, or emotion. A method that worked before reaction. And almost everyone ignored it because it looked boring, passive, unimpressive, until they lost control. This is the illusion modern men live inside. They think control is something you activate in crisis. It isn't. By the time crisis arrives, control has already been decided, not by the moment, by what you trained before it. Most men train intensity. The samurai trained delay. That difference changes everything. In a moment, I'll explain why almost everyone ignores this method and why ignoring it feels harmless until it costs you control permanently. But first, understand this clearly. If your control depends on how you feel, you don't have control. You have conditions. And pressure does not respect conditions. This chapter is not meant to scare you. It's meant to remove a lie. The lie that control is about strength. It isn't. It's about timing. And the samurai mastered timing in a way most men never even consider. That method is still available, but only if you're willing to look at control differently than everyone else. The reason this samurai method is ignored is not because it doesn't work. It's because it doesn't feel like control. Modern men are trained to associate control with intensity, strong emotions, fast decisions, immediate action. The samurai rejected all of it. Their method looked slow, quiet, unimpressive, which is exactly why it survived pressure. Most men ignore what doesn't flatter their ego. This method offers no adrenaline, no visible dominance, no moment where you feel powerful. In fact, it often feels like you're doing nothing. That's why it's dismissed.
People want control that looks like confidence. The samurai built control that worked before confidence mattered. Here is the part most people miss. The method only becomes valuable after you've already lost control once. Before that, it feels unnecessary. You think, I don't need this, I'm fine. You think, I can handle myself. You think, that's too extreme. So you ignore it. And then pressure arrives. Not dramatic pressure, not cinematic pressure. Everyday pressure. Deadlines, conflict, fatigue, disrespect. And you react just a little too fast. That's where control slips. Not in a breakdown, in a moment. A rushed response, a sharp tone, a decision made to escape discomfort. You don't notice it immediately. That's what makes this dangerous. The samurai warned about this exact blindness. They knew that the first loss of control never feels catastrophic. It feels justified. I had to react. There was no time. Anyone would have done the same. This is why the method is ignored. It doesn't promise control after the reaction. It prevents the reaction from happening at all. That sounds passive to modern ears. It isn't. It is ruthless, because it removes the one thing men love to protect, their right to react. Most men would rather feel powerful than be controlled, so they chase methods that amplify emotion. The samurai did the opposite. They removed emotion from the decision point entirely. And that removal feels like loss. Loss of expression. Loss of release. Loss of drama. That's why people resist it. They confuse emotional suppression with discipline. The samurai weren't suppressing emotion. They were disqualifying it from command. There is a difference. Emotion could exist. It just couldn't decide. Modern men cannot tolerate this idea. They want to feel heard by their own impulses. The samurai refused to listen. This is where disciplined men still fail. They believe discipline means reacting better. The samurai knew real discipline means not reacting at all, at least not immediately. This delay feels unnatural at first. Your mind screams to move, to respond, to correct, and you don't. That silence feels wrong. That is why most people quit the method here. They mistake discomfort for failure. It isn't. It's the method working. Because the first thing control removes is the habit of instant response. And almost no one is willing to give that up until it costs them something. In the next chapter, I'll show you the exact moment where control is actually lost and why it happens faster than most men realize. This is the part even disciplined people get wrong.
Most men think they lose control when they feel overwhelmed. That is wrong. Control is lost before overwhelm, before panic, before emotion feels too much. The samurai identified the exact moment. It happens when reaction outruns awareness. A stimulus appears, and you move before you even realize you moved. That gap is where control dies, not in anger, not in fear, in speed. The faster the reaction, the less control exists. This is why intelligent men still fail under pressure. Their minds are fast, their reactions are immediate, and speed gives the illusion of competence. But speed is not control. Speed is exposure. The samurai noticed something most people never do. Pressure does not need to be intense. It only needs to be sudden. A sharp comment, an unexpected demand, a moment of disrespect. And you respond instantly. Your tone shifts, your posture changes, your decision locks in. Later, you think back and say, I shouldn't have reacted like that. That sentence is the evidence. Control was already gone. Here's the uncomfortable truth. If you reacted instantly, you never had control in that moment.
You had habit. This is where disciplined men still lie to themselves. They believe discipline means reacting correctly. The samurai knew that is impossible. Reaction is automatic. Control is deliberate. You cannot control what is automatic unless you slow the moment down. This is where most modern methods fail. They teach you what to do after emotion spikes. Breathe, count, reframe. By then, it's too late. The samurai trained the moment before reaction. They trained delay. Not hesitation, not fear. Delay. A fraction of a second where nothing happens. That pause feels unnatural. Your body wants to move. Your mind wants release. And you deny it. This is the hardest part of the method. This is where viewers leave. If this feels uncomfortable, good. This is exactly where weak control collapses. Most men cannot tolerate that pause. They mistake it for weakness, for passivity, for loss of power. The samurai saw it as the only place power exists. Because in that pause, you are no longer reacting. You are choosing. That pause is invisible to others, but it changes everything. Without it, you are always behind the moment. With it, the moment waits for you. This is why men who keep it together still explode later. They never trained the pause. They trained endurance. They trained suppression. But suppression still allows reaction. The samurai removed reaction entirely at the decision point. They understood that once reaction happens, control is already a memory. This chapter should unsettle you, because it reveals something uncomfortable. If you pride yourself on quick responses, you are vulnerable. The next chapter reveals the method itself, not in theory, not in philosophy, but in structure, and why most men misunderstand it even when they try to practice it.
This is where most explanations fail. Because the samurai method is not a mindset. It is not a belief. It is not staying calm. It is structure. The samurai did not trust the mind to remember what to do under pressure. They assumed it would fail. So they removed the mind from the moment where control is lost. Here is the method, stripped of mysticism. They trained a delayed response that was triggered automatically, not by emotion, by rule. When pressure appeared, they did not ask how to feel. They executed a sequence. Posture, breath, stillness, always in that order. This sequence created the pause, not a pause of thinking, a pause of action. That distinction matters. Most modern techniques ask you to think first. The samurai never did. Thinking is slow. Thinking invites emotion. Structure acts faster than emotion. This is why the method looks passive from the outside. Nothing dramatic happens. No visible dominance, no aggressive control. Just a man who does not move when movement is expected. That stillness feels wrong to modern men. They interpret stillness as weakness. The samurai knew better. Stillness is not inaction. It is withheld reaction. This is why the method is ignored. It offers no emotional reward. You don't feel powerful. You don't feel righteous. You don't feel victorious. You feel neutral. And neutrality terrifies men who rely on emotion to feel alive. The samurai trained this neutrality relentlessly. They practiced it when nothing was wrong, during training, during routine, during boredom, so that when pressure arrived, the sequence activated automatically. This is the part most people misunderstand. They try to use the method only when they feel stressed. It fails, because structure must exist before the moment arrives. You cannot install brakes while the car is already skidding. The samurai installed brakes everywhere. Posture was corrected constantly. Breath was regulated habitually. Stillness was practiced daily. Not for peace, for timing. This created a permanent delay between stimulus and response.
That delay is control. Without it, you are always reacting. With it, the world slows down. This is why the samurai appeared unreadable. People could not predict their response, could not provoke them easily, could not rush them, because reaction had been removed from the equation. This is the method everyone ignores, because it demands discipline when nothing feels urgent, because it requires repetition without reward, and because it does not make you feel strong until the moment strength is required. In the next chapter, I'll explain why even disciplined men still lose control when fatigue arrives. This is where most methods collapse, and where the samurai made their final adjustment. This is where most men lie to themselves. They believe control fails because pressure was too high. That is rarely true. Control fails because fatigue removes structure. The samurai knew this was the most dangerous phase. Not anger, not fear, not chaos, tiredness. When energy drops, men stop enforcing rules. They skip posture, they rush breath, they allow reaction to creep back in, and they don't notice it happening. This is why disciplined men still lose control. They built control for peak moments, not for long ones. Fatigue does not attack violently, it erodes. A slightly faster response, a slightly sharper tone, a small justification. I'm exhausted. I don't have time for this. It's not that serious. This is where control actually collapses. The samurai trained specifically for this phase. They assumed fatigue would arrive. They assumed motivation would disappear. They assumed emotion would spike when energy was lowest. So they removed effort from the method. This is critical. Their structure did not require strength. It required obedience. Posture was enforced even when tired. Breath was slowed even when rushed. Stillness was maintained even when irritation demanded release. No exceptions. This is where modern discipline fails. Modern discipline relies on trying harder. The samurai relied on trying less. Less emotion, less interpretation, less choice. When fatigue arrived, nothing changed. That is the key. If your method changes when you're tired, it is not a method, it is a mood. The samurai treated fatigue as a test of structure, not a reason to adjust, not a reason to relax, a signal to tighten enforcement. This is uncomfortable because tired minds want relief, they want shortcuts, they want permission. The samurai denied it, not harshly, mechanically. No inner argument, no self-talk, just execution. This is why their control appeared inhuman. They did not rise to pressure, they remained unchanged by it. Most men collapse here because they expect discipline to feel supportive. The samurai expected discipline to feel indifferent. Indifference is powerful because it does not argue with fatigue, it ignores it. This chapter is where many viewers quit because it removes the final excuse. If you lose control when tired, it is not because you are human, it is because your structure is optional. The samurai made structure non-optional. That is why control survived long battles, long days, long lives. In the final chapter, I'll show you the last rule that locks control permanently, the rule that prevents collapse even when pressure becomes constant and fatigue never leaves. This is the point of no return. This is where the samurai method stops being a technique and becomes a line you don't cross back over. Because the final failure of control does not come from anger, fear, or fatigue. It comes from identity drift. Most men practice discipline like a tool, something they use when needed, something they put down when life feels lighter. The samurai never made that mistake. They understood a brutal truth. If control is something you do, you will eventually stop doing it. So they turned control into something they were. This is the point of no return, not because it feels empowering, but because it removes choice entirely. At this stage, the method no longer asks you to remember rules. Rules are enforced automatically. Posture corrects itself. Breath slows without instruction. Reaction is delayed without effort. Not because you're calm, but because reaction no longer has permission. This is what people misunderstand. They think control is about restraint. It isn't. Restraint still implies desire. The samurai didn't restrain reaction, they disqualified it. Reaction wasn't resisted, it wasn't debated, it simply wasn't allowed to lead. That is why their control looked unnatural. People could not provoke them easily, could not rush them, could not bait them into emotional speed, because speed had been removed from their identity. This is where most men fail permanently. They build discipline around circumstances. When I'm rested, when things are stable, when I have time. The samurai built discipline around who they were regardless. That difference is everything. Once control becomes identity, pressure loses leverage. Not because pressure disappears, but because there is nothing left for it to manipulate. No mood to hijack, no ego to threaten, no reaction to trigger. This is why the samurai never explained themselves. Explanation invites influence. Influence invites compromise. They didn't argue for their discipline, they lived it, and living it made argument irrelevant. This is the final lock. You stop asking, "Am I controlled right now?" because the question no longer makes sense. Control is no longer an action, it is the default. This is why the method feels extreme. It removes flexibility where weakness enters. It removes choice where excuses hide. It removes identity drift entirely. And once removed, it does not return. This is the samurai method everyone ignores until they lose control. Because only after control is gone do most men realize they never built anything to protect it. Now you know what the samurai built instead. Not calm, not confidence, not emotional mastery. Structure, delay, identity. This is not a method you turn on in crisis. It is a line you hold long before crisis arrives. Cross it and control becomes permanent. Ignore it and control will always feel temporary. The choice is quiet, invisible, and once made, it decides everything.